Hey guys, this is Mike from Tech Tangents. I'm here with Jim at SHOT Show 2022 with a real quick bonus episode for you, brought to you by Dryfire Mag. Dryfire Mag solves the common and annoying problem of how to rack the slide every time you press the trigger in dry fire training. With the Dryfire Mag, you can double your training reps in just a few minutes a day at dryfiremag.com. So we're here at SHOT Show 2020 with Jim. What's up, Jim?
Hey.
And we are obviously checking out all the new gear and innovation and creativity, and we wanted to do a quick little bonus talk about innovation in the market. And one of the things that we've noticed in coming to these shows and seeing all of the stuff is there is something for everyone here. Like if I'm trying to sell a flashlight or make a flashlight, I can sell that to anybody, and everyone needs a flashlight, right? That's easy. But then there's also those things that can be marketed to a more narrow market, like if I'm
CNC machine or a Lenco Bearcat armored vehicle, right?
Or a minigun.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think everyone could use a mini.
that's true. It's true. But it brings up a couple of things. On one hand, we talk about how like gear has to have a requirement. You shop for a piece of equipment and you want to start with your requirement and work from there to figure out what it is that you need. On the other hand, there's a lot of stuff that gets, it's a solution without a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's gear that you find that you're like, no one needs that. That's dumb. But at the same time, there are things out there for problems that you probably face every day that you didn't realize there was a solution for.
And not all of them are perfect solutions. Sometimes, in the developmental process, you get an 80% solution. It's still better than nothing. It's better than whatever you have right now, but it doesn't get you all the way there. But at least it gives you a place to start where you can start working prototypes back and forth or work with the vendor to get something better.
Yeah.
Now, we get a lot of questions, or at least I get a lot of questions, when people find out I'm going to SHOT Show. They have a picture in their head of a giant gun show. And in a sense, it is a giant gun show. There's 27 billion guns in all the expo rooms. And it is a giant show. But one of the biggest things that you notice is it kind of all blends together, right? As you walk down aisle after aisle after aisle of tables and booths, you see, the 6,000th new fancy AR-15. And it's the same old AR-15.
Oh, cool. A new AR.
Yeah.
Never seen that before.
And what it is this is a big industry. That's probably the biggest thing you learn going to SHOT Show is this is $1 billion or multi-billion-dollar, depending on if you count the defense contractors industry. And they don't all really care about your tactics. They don't really all care about your ideas. What they really care about is your money.
Yeah.
And
or your agency's money or whatever.
And they're experts at separating you from it because they have to keep their investors happy and they have to keep their owners happy. And the burden is always on you to be a critical consumer of information, a critical consumer of products, put your own ideas and requirements first as you're walking around. And you see some trends. And that's actually one of the cool parts about SHOT Shows. You can kind of see where the industry is and where it's headed. The first time I went to SHOT, it was obvious that the companies had figured out AR-15 was, the winner of the modern sporting rifle competitions, and that's where the profit was. And so every company was coming out with an AR-15, including companies that were not traditionally AR-15 companies. Companies that specialized in revolvers were coming out with an AR-15. And this year, in 2022, and of course, this is kind of a weird year for SHOT, right? This is a big expo, and we have COVID, and a lot of people simply didn't come, right? There are whole sections of exhibits that are completely empty, where they had to pull out at the last minute because of COVID or budget or whatever. And there are a lot fewer people here this year. But what that gives us is the opportunity to talk and, talk face-to-face with a couple of companies we wouldn't otherwise get to talk to.
There's a lot to unpack in this, and this is why we want to do a talk about it. One is, where innovation happens. And this is where they're in the normal distribution of people. Most people are fitting somewhere in that status quo, where it's just, this is how we've always done things, this is how we do it. And there's a sliver of outliers on the other end where that's where creativity happens. And that can be a challenge because some people get so easily distracted by the new shiny objects that they lose focus, or it clouds their judgment on really the mission, right? And kind of circling back to those requirements thing. the mission drives the gear train. They're constantly looking at new things, and they're constantly looking at solving problems that maybe don't exist. That makes people uncomfortable. And sometimes it's because it is a distraction, but other times it's because that is what starts to turn the needle, right? And if someone came to you and said, this is going to be, you know, whatever the next thing after the AR is, right? The AR-15 is like the thing right now.
Yep.
And there's going to be a new rifle someday that's going to take over the AR. And when it first comes out, people are going to be like, well, why do I need this? What problem did the AR have that this is solving? And the thing about it is turning the needle, that's going back to Jim's original point, is you're going to start to find that there might be something out there to help you solve a problem, and it's only 80%. It's not all the way there, but it's a step in the right direction, and now it starts to shape your tactics, right? You get that 80% fix, and you're like, ooh, well, what if we can make it do this, or what if we can make it do that? Now, that would be really cool. Like, that would change the game a little bit, right? And now we come up with ideas that, the gear don't shape the ideas, but the gear inspired a use case where the tactics start to emerge from it, and it kind of comes full circle, right? But the people in the industry that do that innovation and that creativity that are turning the needle and bringing those 80% fixes to things, like, that's where you see progress.
And some of this is in the feedback between customer and vendor, right? And some vendors are better at listening to customers than others. Some don't listen at all. And some customers are better at giving that feedback in a meaningful way, right? And the very first time I went to SHOT Show, I was looking for one particular type of flashlight. I was looking for one really bright flashlight and one really dim green flashlight. And what I didn't like at the time was a lot of the flashlight makers were making ones that had like a little microchip in them. So you have to click it 2 times to get it to be bright, and like
Up, down, A, B, left, right, start.
2.5 times minus 69 to get it to strobe. And like, as a pilot, the very last thing I want in a blacked out cockpit is a strobing light. And I don't want a light that will turn on in a tactical environment when I don't want it on. So I want to be able to lock it out. And I would go to the big flashlight companies, you name it. I'd go talk to them, and I'd be talking to their sales reps. And the sales reps aren't, they're not in charge of designing it. And I'd say, hey, I need a flashlight that doesn't just turn itself on in my pocket. And they'd be like, that's interesting. So how many of these are you going to buy? Are you going to buy 5,000 copies? Because if you will, then we'll
build it.
We'll talk about
no
that.
Problem.
And I'd be like, well, no, but I perceive that a lot of people in a tactical environment might want a flashlight that doesn't turn itself on in their pocket. And they'd be like, oh, that's interesting. And then they would go on to the next person at the show, and
the next guy that says buyer on his badge.
Yeah, and so SHOT Show isn't necessarily the best opportunity to have that back and forth. But it's the chance to meet the people or get in touch ultimately with the people who may be able to help you get to that solution. So that's I think, one of the benefits if you are an agency representative from a law enforcement agency or a military unit, that you can go start building those connections so you can get the feedback moving back and forth between you and the vendor.
Yeah.
And requirements change over time. And this is a tricky thing in military stuff is, we start out, we think we want one thing, and then the colonels and the generals get involved, and it kind of shifts and kind of shifts. There's a whole movie about it called The Pentagon Wars, right? Where they're going to build a troop carrier, and then they're like, well, what if we strap some missiles to it? And then they're like, well, what if we put a turret on it? And then they turn it into a tank, and they're like, well, if it looks like a tank, it's going to get shot at. We need to add more armor to it. And the vendors, the designers and engineers were trying to like keep up with all these shifting requirements, and they ended up making this monstrosity of a tank. Sorry if that's a spoiler alert. Go find the movie The Pentagon Wars. It's a good one. But it's a good example of how this process can get really, really warped if you don't have a deliberate, disciplined process to get the gear you actually need.
Yeah. And so where I'm going with this is with something like SHOT Show, this giant gun show, if you will, with all of this gear. And there's so much of it. Like I said, there's something for everyone, and then there's the things that maybe one person at the show will buy, right? Like, and it's one person representing one agency or organization that needs that one thing.
And just real quick, if you're not familiar with the term SHOT Show, this is the shooting industry outdoor trade show, right? So you don't buy guns here. You don't like walk in and buy an AR-15.
Right.
This is for a gun dealer to talk to their distributors to do their buy for the year. That's the kind of buy that happens here.
Yeah. And what you see at stuff like this is, there's a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's garbage, and a lot of it's great, and a lot of it is the same stuff that you see every time, right? It's the same thing every year. But again, where I'm going with this is think about it in terms of, not being about the gear. That the intangible thing here is where do the ideas come from that start to shape and change our tactics, right? In terms of being a critical consumer of information, which we're big on, and a critical consumer when you're buying stuff so that you stop having tubs of garbage in your garage or basement or whatever. Being a critical consumer and looking at something and say, is this something that I need? And, you have to challenge your assumptions a little bit, because on one hand, I don't want you buying something because it says it's tactical, or because it looks cool, or because so-and-so, some Army Ranger, Navy SEAL guy uses it, or something like that, because he's working in a world that might not apply to you. So you need to be critical about what your use case is. The mission always drives the gear train, right? But on the other hand, I want you to take yourself into that kind of innovative, creative mindset and say, well, what are the scenarios where maybe I could use this? And then you can start to think about, well, this isn't the solution for that problem, but maybe like there's something like it that could work in a better way or in another way. And again, that can start to shift, your worldview on home security or self-defense or concealed carry. And it's not because necessarily you're using the same thing that some Navy SEAL ninja guy used, but it was inspired by something that they did.
And there's some times where technology can drive changes in tactics rightly. And one of the things that we're seeing in this particular show is a lot of innovation in unmanned aerial systems, UASs, drones, right?
Yep.
And what that technology brings me is the ability to not have to go face to face to find out what's going on inside of a room or on top of a building. I can send the robot, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of development that we're seeing this year for that.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of innovation in that space, and obviously, like when it comes to technology stuff, night vision, sensor, infrared cameras that can see that I can position under doorways. I mean, there's so many things out there that, from a technological standpoint and having the capability, sure, it definitely changes things. And that's kind of where we're headed with this, is just be critical about those things. Don't dismiss something just outright. Really think about its use cases and think about it. Although the mission drives the gear train, you still need to have an open mind and think about innovating and being creative and trying to outsmart the competition and outsmart your enemy, whatever that might look like for you.
And don't forget, they are innovating too. And if you don't get that, you're wrong, right? The Taliban were innovating for 20 years, and it turns out they, in a lot of ways, were out innovating us. The cartels are out there innovating. They're finding new and exciting ways to move dope around. And bank robbers are innovating. And so you have to be aggressive with staying ahead of them. And technology isn't everything, but it is part of your competitive advantage.
Yeah. Just don't lose the people and ideas component behind it. Don't buy it because it's a shiny object. Just, think through it. This is one of those keeping opposing ideas in your head straight scenarios, right? Where the gear matters, but not as much as you do. And your ideas and your tactics. So, all right, I think that's all we got, guys. Again, from 2022 SHOT Show, we got a lot of stuff coming out on our social media and a couple more of these episodes, hopefully. But we hope you check it out. Don't forget about our main episodes that we put out on the 1st and the 15th of every month. You can find us on social media. We are at TacTangents. Email us info@tacticaltangents.com. And that's all we got. Good talk.